We're live. It says we're live. We're not
Okay.
quite live yet. Okay. Hey guys, how you doing? This is Illegitimate Scholar Live on. Didn't title this one because I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about, but we talked about a number of things the other day, and that's what we're going to keep talking about. But this is Brooke. Do you want to do your own introduction? Oh, also, by the way, Brooke, I didn't tell you this. This is the first time that a woman's ever been on the podcast. By the way,
No way.
I don't
Cool.
have a guest every day, so it's like there's been like 12 white dudes. But yeah, it's been all white dudes. So this is a win for us. This is a W.
Well,
That you're
honored.
here.
I'm honored to be the first representing.
Yeah, good representation as well. You guys will see. So yeah, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Brooke Sherwood. Lots of, I was telling Sam, experience in just corporate America. So got my background and started out actually in politics, ironically enough. And then, yeah, that was like, I was a poli-sci major with double minor in psych and criminal justice. So it was going to be law school bound. Then ended up in software sales and have had a couple different software sales jobs ever since. And I'm actually in between opportunities right now, but doing some contract marketing and sales work for myself. You like the way I worded that? A very corporate way as well.
Yeah, it's like I was saying this to you before that you have like such this corporate vibe like on the outside, but it becomes very quickly that you're not like generic a little bit after that. The way I phrased it in the text message was like you give off basic white girl vibes and then you're like not immediately, but yeah, I don't know why I said it more professionally here than in a text message. This would be the place to have started with that. But yeah, like basic white girl energy, but that's like not true. Not energy, but first impression immediately, and then it's just shatter. Yeah, so let's shatter that.
All right. Well, I always joke that people hate me for what they love me for, even in corporate America, because I demolish corporate facades, which is really good for sales and really bad for branding sometimes.
Yeah, well, branding can be a little bit too soulless. But what were we saying we were going to start with? You had a story, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you asked me how long I was going to be in Miami, and I said I wasn't sure, but my most kind of recent journey, part of why I'm in between opportunities right now as well, is because I packed up 2 suitcases for a 5-day business trip in New York. I was living in Colorado at the time and then just never went home. So ended up in New York for something like 14 days. The time is still a little blurry, if I'm being honest. I just kept canceling my flight home. Like, I think I canceled it 3 times. I think I delayed it twice, and then on the third one just said I canceled it, and I thought I was going to move to New York. Then I
Really
kind of
terrible place to move to. Sorry to interrupt, but really terrible place to move to right now, I think. That's the biggest thing to me is like if you were choosing to move to somewhere better,
I
whatever,
was in
but
my own world, if that makes sense. Like, it
yeah.
was more just like, well, I said I was running towards, but the reality is I was probably more running from. Um, then I ended up in Florida because I actually had a client. He was a past client. This is a hilarious story as well. I met him on a plane like a year ago. He asked me, "Can you come into the office?" And I said, "Sure." Um, Ended up doing work for his like generator company here and needed a place to go because I realized that I was in the middle of like a clinical manic episode, and didn't have very many options. And so I remembered his kids had dealt with some like mental health stuff and text Eric and said, "My therapist thinks I'm in the middle of a manic episode. I need a place to go. I'm in a hotel room in New York alone." And he said, "We got you." And then that's how I ended up in Florida.
Yeah, with him and his wife and his kids, by the way, right?
With him and his wife and his kids.
Yeah.
That's important context.
Yeah.
Yes, him and his wife and his kids. All of his kids are like, I mean, I'm 24. All of his kids are 19. So
Oh,
basically, I'm just
okay.
like emerged into the family as one of the 4 kids. His wife was joking the other day. She's like, "Yeah, we've ended up with lots of rescues," and she was talking about dogs, and I was like, "Well, you can add me to the list."
Oh my God. Yeah. And I mean, I think you remember like when we first met, when you told me this story, you were like, "Oh, I was in the middle of this like manic episode." And then this guy I had met let me live with him. And I probably had a look of horror on my face when you said that to me.
You did,
And
you
then you were
did.
like, "Oh, he has kids with his family." Like, I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool." Like, that's like the beginning of like a freaking Sunday special or whatever. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I literally ended up in like a $2 million home with like him, his wife, and his kid. I had no idea where I was going. They could have lived in a shack in the woods. Like, truly. I mean, I had done work for them. I had been to their office, so I knew that like, I had a little bit of context. But I ended up in quite the resort. I call it the Johnson Resort. Or okay, this is like a random side tangent, but have you heard the Billy Joel song Vienna?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love
Okay,
Billy
so it's
Joel.
like my favorite song ever, and I told Eric and Angela that that's what I refer to their house as, is it was my Vienna.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, and this like gets in number one. just so we're clear here, it really is about who you know. And like everything in life is about who you know and like what impressions you can make on people. And that's like really why I wanted to talk to you on here, because I think you were a little apprehensive at first about like what you could offer a show based on cultural anthropology. But you can offer a lot, I think, because like you have a very unique perspective on it. And like I said, like you at first you give off like basic white girl vibes, but that's not it. That's not the truth. And there's like a lot more in there. And there's a lot of lessons in that as well. So yeah, after Miami, you're still in Miami, so there's no after Miami.
I'm still in Miami. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I was in Davie, and then like I have since got my own Airbnb in Miami, and then I'm gonna figure out where I go from here.
Okay.
But we're not sure where that is yet.
Yeah, but not in an unsafe way though.
Not in
Like,
an
yeah,
unsafe way.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like I'm in between opportunities, so there's lots of like who knows where the next opportunity will take me. If it's remote again, I'll probably stay in South Florida for a while. If it did happen to be somewhere else, then
Yeah.
I'm able to move right now.
And I love that attitude too, because it reminds me of like a nomadic attitude, but it is a nomadic attitude, but like nomadic steppe culture attitude for a lot of human history. And like this is like the original Indo-European, like where Indo-European languages come from, and a lot of other ones as well, like the Turkic and a lot of the Chinese stuff as well. They're all rooted in this nomad culture, and eventually people settle down. But I mean, and the people listening live right now, you've heard me talk about this many times before, but there's a lot of times in history where nomads come in and they kill the settled people and they take over, they kill some of them, enslave others, serfdom, all this bad stuff that we talk about on the show all the time. And they create like the nomads then create the new order, the new like high political order. And then 100 years later, those nomads are then settled and then they get killed by new nomads. There's a lot of chances, many cases of this happening. Yeah, historical metaphors is what we do here, but I
No,
just
that's
distracted
interesting. I
myself
mean,
from the
it's
real point.
comparable to the digital nomads right now with like remote work. I mean, because
Right.
they can go anywhere. And you're seeing them
Disruptive.
happen. Yeah, you're seeing them go to places where like average income is like 45, 50, 60K, but they're going in with six-figure salaries because they can, because they work remotely. So they're working
Yeah.
for a California company. And then that's actually really interesting.
And that, I mean, that has implications on the people living in those places as well. I mean, the episode that just came out today is about globalism and architecture and some other influences of globalism, but yeah, all of that stuff is right on it. But yeah, nomads, they disrupt, right? Even nomads today, the disrupting that the nomad steppe warriors were doing was violent and bad. But like this disruption maybe is better, I think.
I think there's pros and cons to it. I mean, I think, like you
Yeah.
said, it has like downfalls for the people that are living there. I don't know. I look at it more as it just is. I like it's just a reality. It's just happening, but I don't know whether it's good or bad. And I always joke that morality is a
Yeah.
construct, so I don't take a position on that.
Morality is a construct. And yeah, and again, anybody listening to this right now knows exactly why I brought you on at this point. Because yeah, like social constructs is like the biggest thing I talk about. It's because like even language is social construct. And I texted this to you earlier, but that you should read the Tao is what I said that you should read. And it's a really short book. I have I have a few copies right here, but the first line of it is the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. And that has like spiritual implications and everything, but I apply it as well to social constructs. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. And when you do that, I mean, even words, and then by extension, languages, which clearly are, but even just individual words are socially constructed in the way that we think about them. And the institutions that we have are full of steps and steps of social constructs. Am I losing you here?
No, this is really interesting. So I always say there's certain times people are really frustrated with me in corporate settings, actually, often where I won't like say something and I'm like, well, semantics just matter a lot to me. I'm really careful about what I speak into the universe because, like, and then like I don't know if you know this stat, 93% of texts are misconstrued because there's like no tonality or any like because of like exactly what you're talking about. So and the other thing I always joke is like my words have failed me whenever somebody's like not trying to understand, like not understanding what I'm saying. It's like language has failed me
Yeah.
because of exactly what you're talking about. So that's me getting excited, not you're losing me. I think it's actually really interesting.
Good. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like communication is, I have this talk with people all the time because like I try to get to the bottom of like what they're saying, but like communication is a two-way thing, right? Like there's one person, there's output and then there's input, and you know the person talking is thinking one thing and then they're outputting information, and then the other person filters it through theirs. It filters it through their own filter of how they view information, and they're not getting the full story. And the effect of communication, like the best way to communicate with somebody is by having shared experiences with them and shared understandings and shared ways of viewing the world, or having methods that you have to understand, not, or to diminish or maybe train your own lens of looking through what the other person is saying to try to really understand what they're saying. I think a lot of human communication that we have today is a bit of an obsession with certain social constructs and treating those social constructs as true. And I did a 4-part series on this, on the anthropology of religion, but in religion, like, there is an element of social construction to it. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but like, religions are socially constructed in the way that their rules are constructed by individuals in certain places. And then those rules are considered as truth, and acting outside of those can create blasphemy. You know, people get their heads cut off in British classrooms, like, things get blown up, East Timor, new countries get created, all this stuff. And in that case, if you apply that same type of truth to a level of a social construct, if you apply this religious level of truth, but to things that are not explicitly thought of as religion, number one, it's a social construct that something is a religion. But if you apply it to other things, then you have people that believe in the fundamental truth of social constructions that they've created. And this is what Ted Kaczynski in his manifesto described as over-socialization. Yeah, I know, it's that type of thing. Over-socialization, which is that you've been taught so many things that it's taught you how to think a certain way. And when you think through a certain way and you think that that's the only way to think, then it creates all these problems, like huge political issues in the country where people can't even speak to each other because they're not speaking the same language. They don't feel the same way, and they view things as fully unacceptable that other people feel for reasonable reasons based on their culture.
Well, they're looking at communication as so transactional. I laughed at the manifesto thing because when I wrote a manifesto, as you actually know, from the video I sent you, and
I assume it's different than Ted's.
Somebody told me only serial killers and bipolar people write manifestos, and I'm like, well, at least I'm in the second group.
Yeah. You could be both.
You never know.
Don't be both, please.
Oh, I know. That's why I was just laughing at the manifesto part. But they're looking at it as so transactional, and I see that like even in sales all the time, right? Like somebody will be sitting there. It's like, most of my deals have closed because I know that Mark's son bartends in Lakewood, and that somebody's so-and-so is a Panthers fan, and so-and-so is and so many like sales reps even, or same thing in religion. Like, it's like the goal is the transaction of like converting somebody to your religion, of getting them to buy your thing, of getting them to do your thing, versus if you just like looked at conversations without even having like a transactional goal, I saw more success in actually like achieving the quote unquote goal when I was able to just be like, you know what, Sam, it looks like you're really like, you're on edge right now. Is that phone call important? And you're like, yeah, it's my wife. She's blah, 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 blah. I'm like, hey, this is just a software demo. You want to reschedule it? Like, we can talk next week. Yeah. But a lot of people are not tuned into the fact, like I tell people all the time, they didn't like you. They don't trust you. They're not going to buy from you. Like, if you haven't started to pick up on those signals of just how to like communicate and be a human and be genuine with people, conversations aren't going to go far because conversations are two-sided, not one-sided. And I think when we look at them through those like constructs, they become very one-sided. And people feel that. They call it like a push-pull rule in sales. The harder you push, the more people pull. Versus if you pull back, then a lot of times I'm the quietest person in the room, believe it or not, like until people come and start chatting with me. And then once people start asking me questions, then I'll start to answer those questions. But I have like strong rules around all this stuff. Like I never give advice without saying like, can I give you advice on this? Because if somebody's opted in, they can say yes or no. They might not want advice. But a lot of people are just like so transactional and pushing these social constructs upon other people that they believe to be true because they believe them to be true. People have to invite that in. And I think a lot of people forget that everything's not transactional and that these conversations are all two-sided. Tom Brady at the Vault said it really well. He said, what we know is limited. What we don't know is limitless. And so
I wrote that down.
Me too. And when you have that kind of like perspective of like, I just look at there's lots of things I have to teach people, but there's a ton of things people have to teach me. And so I'm just always looking for, like, I always joke I don't take advice from people in areas of life where I don't want their life to look like mine, but say that I don't value how your life looks financially. Well, I might value how your marriage looks, or I might value your relationship with religion, or I might value something else. So it's like understanding that, like, everybody has some facet of who they are that you probably have an area to learn something from. And like,
Yes.
that's like very much how I approach all my conversations, all my relationships. It's funny, I actually call myself a connector. Like, that's on my LinkedIn. That's I don't know how you quantify that as a job, but it's what I do. I just
You
think
shouldn't have to quantify it. You shouldn't have to. That's the point. Like, it should be included. Okay, so let's delve a little bit deeper into this through the metaphor of people with Down syndrome. Okay. Blank look on your face. You're just waiting for a reaction. Okay. Yeah. Sweet. Okay. So I had this conversation recently. Not recently, but I'm thinking about this for a while. So, like, there is, like, people with Down syndrome are sort of going extinct. And that is because, like, and when I say they're going extinct, like, not in the traditional sense, because it's like a genetic thing, I think. So they would, like, keep being made, but they're often aborted. These pregnancies are aborted. And, we're not going to talk about abortion today, but that's what's happening at a much higher rate, is that, like, people with Down syndrome are being aborted. And then there is an organization, I forget the name of it, I should probably look it up to plug it here, but there is an organization that has a lot of influence from people with Down syndrome that are talking about, like, and it's the saddest thing when I first learned about it, because it's like, hey, I have a right to exist. Like, people like me deserve to be born. Like, that's the whole movement thing. And the reason I bring this up is because I think that people with Down syndrome tend to be viewed as not having an economic utility. And that's not always true, number one. But number two, I think that our entire society views almost everything too much through economic utility. And I think this is true for a number of reasons. And I think that what the abortion disproportionately of people with Down syndrome tells to me is that these people who are viewed as not being able to have a full life to do these things, they're viewed as pitiful for that. There's also the element of them being taken care of by the family, which there's not an extended structure for this, so it's, it is a commitment from people. But in more traditional family settings, this would be easier to take care of. But the point I'm getting at is that, in my experience with people with Down syndrome, they have so much joy and they're so happy, and they're nice to the people around them. And this isn't true of any case. Down syndrome people are they're individuals like anyone else, but it's been my general experience that they're really, really good people. And that has value in the world. And I think a society that is disincentivizing that is just really sad and at a dystopian level. And I want to promote things that are just not about just making a dollar. Like, the metaphor I always use is, I'm not in entrepreneurship, or I'm not doing these things. I'm not talking about culture because I want to be sitting on a mountain on a pile of gold like a medieval dragon. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's like what I'm doing every day. I get to do what I love every day. I get to wait and see what Craig says in the comments, since he's funny as hell. And they're like, people are saying hi to each other in the comments. That's awesome. I love this. I love talking about this stuff. Yes, that's how I feel about it. Oh, and there's Craig, right on cue, actually. I have a cousin that has Down syndrome. He's a joy to our family, one of the most loving people I know. Exactly, Craig. Thank you. Always count on you, brother. But yeah, what do you got to say about that, bro?
No, I mean, so in high school, I was actually, for my last 2 years I worked in the special needs room. And we're like, to this day, I have my friend Isaiah Mata, who has Down syndrome. And he calls me, like, frequently. I don't know. I think it's a double-edged sword. I come with that, like, corporate background of, like, I'm with you. I think you're right. I think it sucks that it's, like, not the society that we live in, where things are promoted that don't make a dollar. I do think the only thing that was coming to my brain as you were talking about a lot of this is how AI is, and I don't know if this is on par for this or not, but like how AI is going to start to change that type of stuff. Like the jobs that are going to have value versus the jobs that don't even have economic value. And I think you're going to start to see soft skills, like, and they actually were talking about this at the conference we were at recently as well, how important soft skills are. And how they're lacking. We've put such an emphasis on hard skills, and I always joke I'm the queen of soft skills, and the jack of nothing in hard skills. Like that's all I do is build relationships. But I do think that you're going to start to see soft skills start to matter more as AI starts to take over what has traditionally been what we've considered like paying economical jobs. So I don't know. I think it'll just be interesting to see how that plays out, which I know is another contentious topic.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what will come from that, but I do think that you're going to start to see more like autistic, creative, Down syndrome, different, like start to have a lot more market value because you need people to soft skills in a lot of scenarios and a lot of jobs. And historically we've kind of discounted those, and we've just looked at like who can do the math, who can actually write the copy for the thing, who can actually do the thing. And now it's like, I mean, AI is coding, AI is doing so much of those hard skills. And a lot of the people that have, there's going to be a lot of people with those hard skills, I mean, the market is all supply and demand. This is where my corporate, I won't bore you too much with it, but like you're going to see huge supply of people that have hard skills. And I think you're going to start to see huge demand for the soft skills, as to where that historically has not been true. I think you're going to see that flip.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think there's going to be a bunch of other changes, but I think you're totally right. So before we move on to something else, I just want to read this comment. Monica Perez, she's another creator. She's amazing. I want to work with her. I have her on my list of people to reach out to. Monica Perez, who's awesome. I know a lot of you listening know her. So Monica Perez has talked about her experience having a son with Down syndrome. She said he is so innocent, like an angel, and made her a better person. And I am not surprised. Yeah, because that's valuable. Okay. What else can we talk about? Sorry, I made like a hard shift there. I should have.
Oh, you're good.
I'm not good at remembering stuff that other people said after they said. I loved everything you said, but I was just nodding the whole time instead of writing anything down. So yeah, but it's okay. We can have dead space for a second here. People hate that on podcasts, but not a big deal. We're here for the journey. Okay. Craig, what do you got? I hope you're comfortable with not talking for a little while, because I was a teacher for a little bit, and that makes you the expert at it. That's the best thing I learned in teaching college.
I'm in sales. I'm the queen of the silence. So you drop the price, and then the cost, and then you sit there until they say something. You can't you don't say anything until they say something first.
Right. You don't want to step on your own toes. Yeah, the CIA. I read a book about a guy, or by a guy who was a CIA negotiator or an FBI negotiator.
Was that Chris Voss?
I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
Huh.
Yeah. And Doug Dimmadank says probably one of the strongest in your family too. Yeah, that R word strength, I think, might be a real thing. I think there's like a physiological reason for that. All right. So culture. Culture's our word. I thought I would have something for by now. We both did monologues. That's not usually what we do here. That's good.
Culture's our word here, huh?
Okay. Soft skills. So I've seen, Craig asked, where does Brooke see herself in 5 years? I don't think you're going to have an answer for that.
I always joke that if I say something, that's just setting a limiting belief on myself. If I create a finish line, that's just going to stop me, because I'm going to go way past what I was. So yeah, my answer to that's like, when I was 20, if you'd have told me at 24 that this is where I'd have been, I'd say hell no. And so I think that I would be super naive to think I have any clue where I'm going to be when I'm 29. I do want to launch an accelerator, but like that's not where I see myself in 5 years. That's just like business that I see myself launching.
Hell yeah.
Hopefully even sooner than 5 years. But yeah, who knows? I could be in Europe. I could be in New York. I could be in Miami. I could never leave South Florida. I'm just not sure. Yeah.
And me and Higgy were just talking about this, the other guy. You guys know Higgy in the comments, but he said something like, we were talking about Jimmy Buffett. So everybody should know we're going on a road trip me and Higgy are going on a road trip to the Key West, and we're going to make a crappy documentary. And we're going to produce stuff on the way out there based on the business and life influence of Jimmy Buffett, which sounds ridiculous, but it's what we're actually doing.
An amazing documentary.
Yeah, it'll be produced pretty terribly, because I'm going to be recording this on a camcorder, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I barely record. But look, that's the point. The point is, this is what I want to do. Jimmy Buffett's got a lot to teach, and we're going to do that, and it's going to be a great time. But we were talking about Jimmy Buffett, and Higgy pissed me off because he said, like, do you know what Jimmy Buffett was worth when he died? And I was like, are you about to tell me a dollar amount right now? Like, you know what he was worth when he died? And, you know, that's how you talk about it in common speech. But the words that you use really matter. And, like, what Jimmy Buffett was worth when he died was the incredible positive influence he had made on everybody who's listened to his music and in his life. Incredible dude. Okay, awesome. What was his net worth in dollars when he died? I guess that's a good question, too. It matters. It doesn't matter as much as everything else. But that's the point. Like, business doesn't have to all be about, oh, this was something that I should have written down that I was talking about. Okay. So economics, right? Like transactions, like if you're having a transaction, it doesn't need to be a transaction that's just for money. Like transaction doesn't imply that it's like commercial in the same way. In a lot of places in the world, we got into this if you listen to the show, that religion is just what people do. It's not compartmentalized in a lot of places like it is in Western culture, which this is illustrated by the way that Western culture deals with like Eastern religions that are not really quantifiable into it. There was literally a Gallup article last week about how, like, well, Chinese people say they're not religious, but 3 of them pray at this temple every week. It's like, yeah, they don't get it. It's a different culture. It just doesn't translate, okay? Religion's a social construct. The idea of what a religion is a social construct. So, you know, people, I lost my train of thought every time.
Well, it's funny. So even earlier, whenever somebody commented in the comments about the Down syndrome, and said something about strength, and you immediately went to like physical strength, my brain immediately went to strength, like strong in like situations. And so like even that is like proof of how language can, and who knows what the person writing it meant. They could have meant like a third thing.
Exactly.
You might hate or love this, but I've actually quantified my like social capital, or the way that I continue to build it, because I think a lot of people can struggle with like,
it's fine,
how do you build social cap? Like the reason people look at things as so transactional and dollar amounts is because it's easy, like it's more black and white and clear. And I actually like everybody in my contact list. My friend Jeff taught me this. He's an advisor to me, that he calls everybody in his list at least once a year. And if he doesn't call them within a year, he deletes them. And he kind of, not like a literal tally, but he keeps a tally of like deposits and withdrawals. So a deposit can be sending somebody like flowers when their kid's born or on their birthday, or reaching out. Like I texted a bunch of my mentors and advisors on Labor Day and just said, hey, like happy Labor Day. Hope you're having a great Labor Day. And these are all deposits that I'm making into people when I'm sending them birthday gifts, when I'm asking about how their kids are, when I'm doing these different things. And then when you need a withdrawal at some point, it's a lot easier if you've made deposits into people as well. So I don't know, like that just reminded me of my social capital
yeah
system.
Yeah, and I mean that's a weird way to do it, but it totally works. But it's like, even so in that dollar amount, that's just the way that we do it. But people have reciprocity in other cultures, 100%, and there are often like rules in the culture for dealing with reciprocity that are based on the environment. Like for example, the Inuit have specific rules about taking in strangers because people can get lost in the snow out there all the time. Not the Kalahari. Is it the Kalahari in southern? You don't need to know that, but the Kung people in southern Africa, they are traditionally hunter gatherers, and those people, they traditionally, when they would hunt, they hunt large game. They hunt giraffes, which they can't do anymore, unfortunately, because conservation has some stuff to say with. There's a little bit of globalist conservation kind of having some negative effects on indigenous cultures that do things that are not in line with global conservation. And there's shout out to Stone Age Herbalist on his essay about the issues of conservation there, and how the WWF may be hiring death squads to kill indigenous people in some places. But that's a different podcast. The point is that when the Kung people, I'm doing that wrong. My pronunciation on my clicks is way off, so sorry, but I'm trying my best because that is what they call themselves. They will kill a giraffe, and they'll not only share the meat around them with everybody, but they share it with like other villages, and that's their custom. And of course they do this because it's so goddamn hot there. They can't preserve the meat. They have this giant giraffe, and it helps everybody to do that. And there's rules like that in a number of different places. so like transactions between people, redistribution between people is a common thing as well. So the term potluck, have you heard the term potluck?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody brings something in. The root of that term potluck is from the Pacific Northwest. It's common in the Pacific Northwest, and there's others redistribution ceremonies, or what these are called in other places as well. They're common in Papua New Guinea, throughout chieftain like stage cultures a lot of times. And these people, they have these potlatches where men and women, sometimes just men, sometimes men and women, depending on the culture, they redistribute a bunch of things. And that they have a feast, they give away pigs, they give away like whatever they have, not pigs in the Pacific Northwest, that's Papua New Guinea, but they would give off like, salmon bake, basically. They would do that stuff, give away gifts of significance, sing other people's praises, have these massive gifts, these massive feasts. I mean, even in medieval Europe, this is similar. It's patronage. Shout out Bog Beef and Marbleck, the Good Old Boys podcast they talk about. I don't normally do this many shout outs, but I'm talking about a lot of other people's stuff right now. So 3 or 4 shout outs I've done. But yeah, I'm like a black guy on a podcast right now. Okay. Cultural thing. It's a real cultural thing. Black people do more shout outs.
Like something, yeah. So in sales, like if I'm doing business with somebody in the South, you bet I'm going to call them sir and ma'am. If they're in New York, they are offended. That is rude. Mm-hmm. I sold into higher ed. If they have their PhD, you call them doctor. Like, I would never. I know, but it's the way that it, like, I think we still have these, like, I can think of so many of these, like, relevant customs just in my personal, like, experience, especially in sales. Like, if I'm doing business with an Argentinian, we drink Fernet. If I'm doing, like, there's all these just different things in people's culture. And they're the things that people notice. And it's what I was telling you about, things that, like, again, build those relationships of like, did I close the deal? Like, great example of somebody that actually I never even closed a deal with, but because I just like tuned in to him as a like human, I think he was from Europe or something, and I was just like chatting with him. He called me like 6 months later and brought up, hey, I have a job that's going to be coming up. It's not ready yet, but like I've known since the day have done the demo that you were going to be the person. He's not at the company that he was at when we chatted. His company didn't even buy the software where I was at when we chatted. Yeah. But I just like made an impression by talking to him and like by picking up on these cultural norms, and people remember that. Where is he from? I can't even remember. Every time he picks up the phone, it's bloody hell, Sherwood, bloody hell.
Oh, well, it's probably England.
I knew you'd be able to help me.
Yeah, I mean, it could be another country in the UK, and it might be Australia, but it's probably England.
I'm pretty sure it's European for sure.
It's almost definitely England, just based on the population percentage and that being a phrase there, but it could be a couple other things.
Yeah, but just like things like that, and then I joke back with him, and that like established that relationship, in terms of just talking about social capital and culture and how those culture norms are like so prevalent. I guess I pick up on them more than I even realized, because I don't like think of some of those examples until you were giving the examples you gave, and then I realized like, yeah, how differently I talk to somebody in Texas versus New York versus California whenever I'm chatting with people in any type of corporate setting or any type of setting, really.
It's so much of what I talk about is like, I've talked about this before. So guys in the comments, if you remember me talking about this, like, please remind me. Cause I know I think I have, but like, I've talked about how a lot of what I do, like a lot of academia is just overly complicated, especially in the liberal arts. Like they just overly complicate the words. The stuff's like it's not that hard to read. It's just like I read these academic papers and I'm like, dude, like you could have been way more concise. Like this, it's almost like they just want to write it so that only other people that speak their same elitist jargon can understand it. Like I can understand it because I'm, weird. And I just am obsessed with reading like old manuscripts. But like most people can't understand it, but you could make it so they could understand it. But
have you seen what Huberman's doing?
No.
Andrew Huberman?
Well, some of it, but not relevant to this.
I mean, that's what he's doing. Like he basically, his whole goal behind the podcast is to take these research papers that would take the average human hours and hours and hours to read, and he's just like condensing it down to simple short form like podcasts and information. And you've seen tons of people. I mean, I talk to so many people that are like, oh yeah, now they get like light in their eyes in the morning because that's important. They know that's important to sleep, right? But instead of reading a 100-page research paper, like Huberman put that out in a 30-second TikTok, and you're seeing like the masses start to do these really positive things for their neuroscience and their health, and that's like something that he is like very like that's how he prefaces his podcast, I believe, is just by spreading this, and he wants to just spread this information to everybody so that people have access to that information.
Yeah, and it also speaks to the changing technology and how people interact with the world and how that changes culture, because it wouldn't have been possible a long time ago. I mean, Bill Nye the Science Guy was the science. Like him and Carl Sagan are the ones who are like putting the information out, and then it was Neil deGrasse Tyson, and now it's a whole bunch of people. Not that like Bill Nye the Science Guy is super weird now, but those old videos were great, but they were produced through like things with high levels of entry and social constructs having to like support you. And that's the same thing with academics, is like academics, they go through school, they don't have to make their stuff entertaining. They're not like, their audience in their students isn't really their audience. They don't have to please their audience. They have to please their bosses so they're not, the incentives are for them to please their bosses, not to please students. They don't care what students do. Whereas people who start podcasts and are trying to communicate information to people, like if I stop talking about stuff that the people that listen want to talk about, I don't like, they're not going to listen to me. It's why they tried to give Barack Obama a podcast and it didn't work. No one wanted to listen to it because you can't force that, because he's no Joe Rogan. There's a couple other people, but I just remember Joe Rogan. But
Well,
yeah.
I was gonna say, even less than their bosses, like, you know who actually funds all research, pretty much, right?
Who?
I mean, there's two places research gets funded from, and I know this because I sold research software into higher ed, but I mean, most of them are government grants, so that's actually who they're pleasing. And then the other ones are, I mean, people like billionaires can fund research and grants, and
George Soros.
Those are the people that they're answering to. That's why you see like, oh, the name is escaping me right now. Like the people that own like Tide, and it's like
Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah, like Johnson and Johnson. Like they fund studies, and they want these studies to like. So
and then they only publish the ones they want, just like
corporations funding these studies, and then you have government funding these studies, and those are the two people that they're answering to.
And who controls the government? It's the Nephilim, the lizard people, and they want to research how to create ways to eat humans. So if you break human beings down to their most natural, they kind of act in a certain way. And it does depend on the environment, and it depends on the level of social constructs that you have. But to me, when I am looking at like how people are interacting with the world and what they're doing in like an economic sense, but also like whatever else they're doing, I think that when people's choices start, like the social constructs start stacking up, there are more and more, and even like the people you're interacting with being affected by other, and this is the main point, is that when you're interacting with people on the street, you're interacting with like your environment, and there is things that exist not because they just kind of came up mostly naturally, in the sense that there were less social constructs. So like the local agriculture, the local style of agriculture with local plants, local architecture, very importantly, and also local beliefs, local language that came out of the way that you interact with the world. And you take that, but then everything around you, and also this is the easiest part of this to understand, is what's driving people's interaction with you. Because like if you live in a city and you're walking around like, let's say Paris, and you're walking around Paris, the people that you're interacting with, the buildings that you're interacting with, depending on what part of Paris you're in, I'm sure there's portions of Paris that have globalist architecture that's not informed by French culture at all. There might not really be a lot of French people around, which is fine, but it's not like, that's not natural in the sense that it like is from the bottom up. That's happening through social constructs of human movement that aren't possible in earlier things. I'm not crapping on immigration. I'm just saying like what it is. There's advertisements everywhere. The buildings are created through these processes. The people you interact with might be trying to sell you something. You don't know what their ulterior motives are. And everything comes down to like everything around you starts to add up, that the things just don't make sense because they're not simple, they're not observable in their it's a cognitive dissonance of like the mind that's very specific. Obviously this isn't a very well thought out point, but this is something that could be like a book of information if I was better at writing the stuff down. But does that make sense what I'm saying?
No, yeah, it does make sense.
No, I don't think it does. It's okay if it doesn't.
I'm trying to piece it together. I do feel like there's like an ending to it that's missing, if that makes sense. I was still following,
Yeah,
but I think that there's like more. That's a point to bring back up at some point and finish, if that makes sense.
yeah, definitely. And that's what I do here. We were talking about visionary stuff before, and having incomplete thoughts like that is visionary, maybe not in the best way.
Oh, 100%. I
But I'll
always
get
just,
in it.
my head's in the clouds, my head's in
Yeah,
the clouds. I need the boots on the ground.
yeah.
Where are the boots on the ground?
But you're totally in a safe place here because all the people listening right now are people that know I'm like that and they're pretty okay with it. The live show is a little bit different because I do cut bits out, but like it's still pretty much people that enjoy that because I say I digress probably 4 or 5 times during the episode.
It's your
That's the
tagline.
thing. Yeah. I digress in Cleveland are the taglines, and in OK at the beginning that I'm trying to perfect the OK with the long O.
Oh,
Yeah, all things, and dressing like somebody that wants to live in Key West for the rest of their life. So aesthetics matter.
aesthetics matter.
Aesthetics matter. The so everything around you being socially constructed. When you're let me do an example. So a college classroom. You are in a college classroom. You are interacting with people that you got into this college through a social construct. You were admitted through reaching certain characteristics, which may or may not be in line with your values. And that got you into the college. And then you're in that college. And that college is a selected group of people, somewhat for values, whatever, but they're socially constructed. And they're people from different places, which can be good, it could be bad. It depends on the differences and the similarities they have. And then when you're in the college classroom, you're being taught by professors. And those professors are selected from a select group of people. Today, professors are way more likely to be politically left wing than right. There's very few that are conservative. It's even worse in the Northeast and New England and in more elite colleges. So it like the numbers are pretty high. So they're, for whatever reason, that's what's happening. They're also more likely to be international. They're more likely to be from other countries, and they're more likely to be from upper class backgrounds. Then the information that they're telling, they're also selected for their traits in the sense that they went to college, they went to grad school, they went to get their PhD, they finished their PhD, they got their PhD, doing research, being like socialized in this system, all these different social institutions. And then they were selected to get a job for certain traits that may or may not be the stated traits that they're saying. And then what you have is people from all different walks of life who are in this situation. They're in this college classroom and they're being taught by this professor that's super selected up and down the line, just narrowing in to more and more specific of a type of person, shares traits with others. The research that they're talking about is selected not for necessarily what's best for you as an individual. This person probably doesn't care about you. They have information, they have their own personal goals, and those personal goals are informed by all these different traits that they had. And they have what they need to do for their bosses. And also, I mean, they do have like requirements for how they treat students, but those aren't traits with how they treat students based on what the students valued. It's based on what the administration values and what the school's rules are. Rules are social constructs. So all of that adds up to you being, oh, and there's another element is that, you apply to this school, you go to this school, you're in this school, you can't leave the classroom. There's things you might not really be able to do, even though you feel it's what's best for you to do, because you're in the middle of a term in this college and you'll lose a bunch of money. Another social contract, if you don't do it, you might not be able to have your housing. If you live in the dorms, if you leave the school, that could be a concern for you. And it just adds up and adds up to all this different confusion until you're in a college classroom at 8:30 in the morning. You're drinking a freaking Dunkin' Donuts iced latte, delicious. But you're in that classroom. You're learning some you don't want to learn because you didn't select to take this class. This class was on a list because you're in there to get to an end goal, to maybe get a job, even though you don't really know. You're just maybe you know, maybe you don't. Maybe your guidance counselor said you got to go to college, and your mom's like, that's how you get successful. So you took out $200,000 in debt, and you're in this college at 8:30 in the morning. You're learning you don't want to learn, and you got no way out because you're sunk cost. You're in this world right now. You got to make it work, whether it works for you or not. And it doesn't work for a lot of people. And there's a good reason for that. But we've created a situation in our world where you're just layered into social construct that if you change the way you think one day, which can happen, by the way, if you just get hit in the head with a hammer, your personality can change irreparably forever. There's external forces. What the hell are you supposed to do now if you just spent 25 years learning how to be a swim instructor and now you're a mouth breather for the rest of your life because a circuit got cut in your brain? What are you going to do? You got to do something else. But I digress.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, like, and maybe this is a bad question because I don't think that there's actually an answer to it, but like,
No bad
what's the
questions.
alternative? Like,
Some are
where
better.
is there a place that doesn't exist where a social contract is? Because even entrepreneurship, right? Like, you go out and you take, all you're doing is creating your own set of social contracts because then eventually you're going to need people that are working for you. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I see it like I worked in SaaS. Like, that's arguably one of the more, like, Silicon Valley, like, liberal, and still it's just a bunch of contracts. There's all these, like, quote unquote rules of the way that you behave within these systems. Like, I'm just curious, what's the alternative? Where do social constructs not exist?
So, I mean, it's not that I'm not anti-social construct. I'm just
Yeah,
like intentional social construct. And the extra problem that I see with a
that's
lot of these, yeah, you got to be intentional with your social constructs. I mean, we're intentional. Like I've created social constructs as well. Like the community, this YouTube channel is a social construct. It has a certain culture to it, and like that has been, but it's selected for something very basic, which is just kind of like my ideas personally. I'm a one-man company. I'm just like I take in input from other people. I made what I wanted, and then people like it. They're attracted. They come hang out. But it's just based on me. I'm one guy. And you can do it with 2 people. You can do it with 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. But this is why a company becomes 5,000 people and it fails, because it's like it wasn't built for that. It doesn't have the right culture. But yeah, it's being intentional. But when you have, like, my social construct is very small and there's very low cost. If I suddenly said something that somebody didn't like, they could hop right off. There's a low cost, unless there's nobody that's super involved in this community to the level where it would destroy their life. I hope. If you feel that way, please don't see me, see a doctor. But like, I don't, that's not a thing. There are people that are invested because they talk to me every week. But I don't think it would hurt their lives. They have 15 more important things. But when you live in a place where the social construct is not just one person, but it's like the social construct that is an international Western system of academia that works in one way, then like, what are you going to do? Like, okay, here's an example.
Well, I think it's even larger than that. I mean, what is it? Is it red pill, blue pill? That's what I'm thinking the whole time. Is the Matrix? I can't remember which is
Yeah.
which. But like red pill. I mean, from where we started out when I was talking about my journey of like how I left where I was from and I went for the 5-day like business trip and then I ended up staying there and then I ended up in Florida and then
Journey
there
is such a great euphemism for this. Sorry.
some yeah like some true like I mean, identity crisis around like I left one job where I like to call it, one of my taglines is golden handcuffs. Like I was on track to make very, very good money this year and I left for money and 2% of a company, right, that like never came to fruition because it would have had to be there 4 years to vest at that point, realized that that was not what it was cracked up to be and I wasn't going to make it past 6 months working with that CEO there. And it was like this identity crisis because I think there's this construct around sales as well where it's like we hinge our self-worth upon dollar amounts, upon these external forces. And so it's this whole identity crisis of like, okay, now without these roles, like now that I've like red pilled or whatever, I think it's red pill, away from this, like what's next? What else is there? Like I almost think I went too far, not too far because I'm coming back to this reality, but
Yeah.
like too far off the grid of like really just saying like what does it all matter, and like had this whole identity crisis because I came up in that system of like I was like straight A's, all I cared about was grades and whatever else, and then I went to college and I got a full ride and then I had a 4.0 there and then I graduated in 3 years instead of 4 and then I went right into
Oh,
and then I went right like I had identified and attached myself to so many of these social
I,
contracts. And then when that didn't exist anymore, it was like, who am I? Like that's still a hard question for me to answer.
holy crap. And this was really recent, wasn't it?
Yes, this was like I left the most recent job 4 months ago. And I mean, there's a lot of context here. I left a 5-year relationship at the same time.
Okay. That's
Um,
something we haven't talked about.
yeah,
Okay.
so there was just like all of this turmoil and change, and like I was kind of like breaking free from, I guess, all of these different social constructs all at the same time, and it
Yeah.
became like almost like it was a lot to deal with at one
It
time,
was a
which
lot, but did you ever, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you ever have a moment of freedom where you felt free and you felt good
I think
about
I'm
the
still
future?
living in that moment.
Yeah.
If that may, but yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it's the most terrifying and the most freeing thing ever. And that's what I think, like, I saw a quote today that talked about like entrepreneurship. Like, so many people ask me questions like, how to, like, I always joke, after you leave a 5-year relationship, you know, the people that want to leave a 5-year relationship because they're the ones that start asking you a bunch of questions like, well, how are you? And how did that affect you? And, you know, like they start asking all these questions, but it's like, people, it's just like decisions that we can all make. Like there's nothing that different about me. I was just willing to make the decisions that like terrify most people, and that's all it is. Like there's nothing different between me and anybody that chooses like different paths. I just chose to make the decisions I made.
Yeah. 100%.
But it's very freeing, like incredibly freeing. It's still slightly terrifying sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's also incredibly like it's cool that I can move wherever the hell I want and take whatever job. I mean, I turned down a job. I don't have a job right now, and I turned down a job because I was like, no, that's still not the opportunity that I want. Like that's just not the thing I want to attach myself to right now. Like I'm being pretty selective, and I didn't do everything I did and leave everything I left to just recreate it for myself again. Like I want to be, as you said, I like the word intentional, like very
Yeah.
intentional about what constructs I create again for myself or attach myself to. I do know that I'm in need of social constructs, but
Everybody
I
is.
want them
They
to be
should
the
be.
intentional ones.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that was
I
a little
honestly, no, no, you're good. You're good. I'm distracted by the comments right now. Yeah, no, that was perfect. I almost think that that's like what we can end on because I think it was good and we're almost at an hour. But I'm gonna read the comments. Okay, yeah, a lot of people saying hi to each other. Hey JC, hey Doug, hey Daniel, hey Craig, hey anybody else? I'm sorry if I didn't say hi to you. Okay, I'm not gonna cut that out. I shouldn't cut that out. But Cleveland, because I'm
you
gonna
should
cut this
leave
one
it.
out. Yeah, okay. So potlatch reminds me of the quote from Sitting Bull. All right, Craig. The white man knows how to make everything, but he does not know how to distribute it. Yep, that is a social construction problem. We have a serious issue of distribution in the West in 2023. We have massive amounts of inequality. And even if you don't think that that's a moral issue, which I personally do, but even if you don't think that that's a moral issue, because relativity matters, aesthetics matter, relativity matters. Okay. Relativity matters to humans. So relativity of wealth matters, even if the absolute goes up. Do drugs on camera like Sam? I'm in Connecticut, dude. I'm allowed to smoke weed. I'm not out here doing meth. What are you talking about? I don't even drink. Give me a break. Okay. Um, Relativity of it's a problem for our political stability and it's a problem for our economy because we have a demand side economy. Economies work on demand, not on supply as much. If an economy relies on supply more than demand, you probably have a communist system. That is the practical effects of communism. I know you guys don't like communism, so we should have a based on the demand, and we need to fix the demand because the demand screwed up. The distribution system is off 100%. Thank you, Craig, for that. Cleveland, everyone take a drink. Nobody listen to Craig. You can't take a drink every time I say Cleveland because I'm going to get arrested for making people die from alcohol poisoning because I say it too much. So do not take a drink every time I say Cleveland. Yeah, I do not endorse that. That's on Craig. If you want to get in connection with his lawyer, let me know. I will figure it out for you so that you leave me alone. Just kidding, Craig. I got your back. Okay, Craig, also, life is more important than money and a job. I have a pastor friend who said no one on their deathbed ever said, I wish I had worked more. Yes, not what it's about. I'm an entrepreneur. I like money. Me and Higgy are doing our new thing, Prosperous Parrots. It's not about money. It's about the journey. It's about being present every day. It's about being intentional and having your life do exactly what you want it to do for you, living your life every day that you like. And that doesn't mean you don't have any discomfort ever, but it does mean that the way that you're living in life is in line with your values. And if you're doing something that you really love, you will make money from it. I guarantee you, you can find a way to monetize it unless it's something totally crazy. You consider monetization, but just lower how much you value that. Yeah, that's my advice. And if that resonates with you, that's probably why you're here. Okay. JC, I wish I DM'd that thirst trap 50 years ago. Hey man, if that's what your values are, you don't want to regret DMing the thirst trap,
Never
I
too late
guess.
to start. It's
It's
never too
never
late
too
to
late.
start now.
And apparently freaking nursing homes are like hotbeds of STDs because they're banging all the time. Yeah, that's sick. Okay. So many people get caught up on career and forget every aspect of living. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, I love doing this with you guys because I've attracted. This is on me. I'm the best. Just kidding.
Love
But
attraction.
like what I've produced has created all these great people who talk to each other on a weekly basis, and like in the Discord and here. And I love what they have to say. Everyone's saying great stuff. We're all going off of each other and having a culture that values the right things, and it makes me feel good. It makes me enjoy living my life every day. I don't have to talk to people that I don't have to spend as much time around people that don't have the same values I do, that overvalue money and stuff like this, but still care about it and still care about business for the sake of business. I'm here for the love of the game, folks. I do not want a Ferrari. I am in this for the love of the game. I could be making way more money doing other stuff, I promise you. Okay. Yeah, do it for the love of the game. That's what we're doing. Gosh, I almost read through the comments, but we're just getting more.
Don't
Okay.
fall victim to the golden handcuffs. I'm telling you, that's my favorite euphemism for that. Like golden
Exactly.
handcuffs.
Exactly. It's debt diplomacy on an individual level. You getting tied down with golden handcuffs is like the foreign policy of the West for years. Don't get settler colonized in your everyday life. That's what's happening. Okay. Do drugs on camera like Sam. I just want to live comfortably and be happy. Yes, Doug. Okay, so I'll do some drugs for you. Cleveland.
Still
Cleveland.
wasn't on camera.
God damn it. Okay. This is what happens. We get
You
guests
guys
that
are
tell me
welcome. You guys are welcome.
too much. Oh, book two. I'd love to talk about this.
Full circle.
If anyone remembers, I'll get back to the other questions in a second. Sorry, guys. But this book, Dawn of Everything, it's a big history book, but it's written by these guys. David Graeber, RIP, I think David Graeber. Wengrow's still alive. I've interacted with him a little bit on Twitter. They're like, that's a big history book I recommend to a lot of people. It's an alternative view on history. The guy Graeber also wrote a great book called Debt. Both of them are from a left-wing perspective. Graeber was one of the main guys behind the Occupy Wall Street movement. He was like the main academic, and he basically got exiled from the U.S. for it. And for the rest of his life, he was working at a college in England. And we're not totally globalized in academics right now, but I worry that maybe today or maybe in 20 years, Graeber wouldn't have been able to go to England because maybe England's in that same system of those social constructs. So social constructs at this point are getting to global levels. I talked about the architecture today. If you guys haven't listened to that, the architecture episode goes a lot into the globalizing efforts of architecture and why that's anti-human. But back to the question, unless you have something to say on that, bro.
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, where was I? Do drugs on camera like Sam. Done. I don't think equality is achievable or the highest priority, but that seems pretty accurate. Yeah, so I'm not calling for equality or equity. I'm talking about less inequality, an acceptable level of inequality. Because when we're talking about like, oh, it's so unfair that there's any inequality at all, that's doing the same thing that we talked about before, which is overvaluing money. There's going to be inequality in money, just like there's inequality in people's relationships, inequality of all these things. Plenty of people that don't have a lot of money have insane amounts of like they've done other things and they've done incredibly well at them. Maybe they're like a valued member of society in some other way. And I'm not talking about like the mayor. I'm talking about like I was in some random little restaurant and there was had a talk with the waitress who works there 6 days a week. Everybody in there knows her name. They clearly love her. Like that's a good life. That's a good life for somebody who has the right values. And you don't have to be making the most money. Like she was so personable. She was so nice. She definitely could have gone to the big city and made money in a corporate world, but she would have sacrificed other things. And I don't know how she feels about it personally, but she seemed happy to me.
Ironically enough, there's some semantics here, but I think I always say, and this is like very much what my accelerator is founded on, is there's a really big difference between equality and accessibility.
Yeah.
Accessibility means that they have the options and the choices, like, but lots of people are going to choose not to make those choices, and that's fine. Like, then everything's not equal because when you look at what entrepreneurs sometimes are willing to do, or people that are sitting on a lot of money, I mean, they have sacrificed everything, like practically their humanity. And a lot of people choose not to make those decisions, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But like, there's a difference between, I think, it being accessible and it being equal. I always
Yeah.
joke, like, my best analogy to this is I have a really high bar, but I am not friends with people I wouldn't do business with, and I don't do business with people I wouldn't be friends with. If you happen to meet one bar, you meet both. It doesn't mean that we have to do both, but like, the bar is accessible to anybody. Anybody could meet that bar.
Yeah.
Most people choose not to. Like,
Right.
that's a very big difference. That's the way that I think about that.
Yeah. Hell yeah, bro.
That's my favorite. That's one of my favorite sayings. That's one of my taglines is, if you meet one, you meet both, you
Oh,
know?
I thought you were gonna say hell yeah, bro. Yeah, I say hell yeah, brother a lot. That's another one of my
See,
taglines.
there you go. I say
Usually
brain
don't say bro.
rattle.
You say what?
Brain rattle. That's
Brain
one of my
rattle.
favorites.
I
Yeah.
like that one.
The emoji is the skull and the brain, because it's literally your brain rattling around in your skull.
Oh, okay. Is there any other taglines I'm forgetting in the comments? Think about that while I'm writing this. But is there anything I don't remember that you guys have honed in on? Maybe it's one I'm not even aware of. Doug says, great episode. Everyone give him one, which is a thing from the Marine Corps that he says all the time. No one gave him one. He said, give him one again. Okay. Craig says, good luck, Brooke. Wish you well. Thanks, Craig. Very
Thanks,
kind,
Craig.
always. Daniel says, say something about Vivek before you go. I haven't learned anything new about Vivek. I like him now. I mean, you guys saw me on the live stream for the debates cheering that dude on. I clearly like him a lot. I haven't learned a lot of new information about him at all. I just haven't been in that realm. But if there's any new information that you guys want me to see, send it in the Discord. And yeah, for now, I like him. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Vivek is my choice, I think. And then JC says we're the Durham Bulls. I don't know that reference, but I'm sure that it's probably accurate, JC. All right. Any last thoughts, Brooke?
No, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
I appreciate you all.
Well, we appreciate you. I'm going to speak for everybody when I say that
Thank
they
you.
appreciate you. And if they don't appreciate you, then they can leave. Yeah, you also have to appreciate Doug and Craig as well.
I appreciate it, Craig.
Okay, and JC, last thing. It was around the time that the mainstream media started obsessing with gender and racism. We've been stuck here ever since. Yeah, so there is, I've shared that graph before. There is a quantifiable way to do this, is that it is very true that there was an acceleration of the rate of discussion of race and gender in an inverse relationship with discussion of class-based issues starting in around 2012 when Occupy Wall Street was coming to a head. So yeah, I mean, it's a multi-factor issue. Obviously, it's so complex, but that is a thing of it. And to be honest, it does seem to explain a lot. And this is one of those other things that, like, what we think of as important, what we think our value, like what we think of as important is created through social constructs. And what we think of as important can often be based on what we're seeing. And if what we're seeing is created by someone with a nefarious purpose, this is the end of that thought that I couldn't get to. If what we're seeing is, like, all the time, everything we're interacting with, which is so many things, everyone trying to sell us stuff, the information we're seeing on TV is shown as being news, but it's like all the information in it is selected, and there's certain information, and then they're using, they're using academic papers that have their own social constructs to it, that you're just, the way that the world is, you don't have a good view of it because the information that you're getting that you think is trustworthy is just wrong. And then you're walking around the world and it's not working out for you. And you're like, what? I went to college and I got all this debt and I was supposed to get a good job. And now an apartment is $1,700 and I can only get a job that pays me $3,000 a month and my taxes are $800. So what the hell am I supposed to do? Never mind a mortgage. But yeah, that's what I was thinking about before. Does that make more sense?
Perception is reality. That's my summary of it.
Perception is reality. That's the thing. Because
Yeah.
everything is created twice. And this is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, who lives on in his spiritual children, like me. I'm not one of his best spiritual children, but I am one of his spiritual children based on his definition. He says that things are created twice, once in reality and once in your mind. And this is the root of the only mainstream mental health approach that I think has wide validity in the United States, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. You really, really can change changing your perception is everything, because what's in your head is everything. And that I will leave you with after Brooke says whatever she wants based on what I said, if anything.
That's last. No, I love that perception is reality. I think that's perfect, Hendon.
Yeah, and it is. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.